Welcome to the Strong Life Coach Podcast, hosted by Derek D. Guajardo. That's me. I'm a success coach and author, and I love finding inspiring stories from lawyers and leaders while highlighting the universal principles of success. Today I'm joined on the podcast by attorney Gilberto Matute. Gilberto, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Derek.
All right. For anybody who doesn't know you, I'll share a little bit about your background. Attorney Gilberto Matute practices law in Florida, where he focuses on estate planning and tax law. And Gilberto, let me just go ahead and start. What inspired you to become an attorney?
Well, I was, in our prep work, and I brought this up, and you told me, save it so that I have a natural reaction, because the way I interpret what made me decide to become an attorney, I feel like, it's mundane, right? Sure. I was interested in taking an elective, a law class. I took this elective, I liked it, and what did I do? The next year, I took it again, started doing a mock trial, and little by little, I just kept getting more involved and enjoying the law, and it made it pretty easy for me to just decide I'm just going to go to law school. My local, FIU, Florida International University, one of the biggest, public universities in the country, and definitely the biggest one here in South Florida, right around the corner from me. So undergrad with, the intention of doing criminal law. That didn't really work out. It just didn't attract me, but right after undergrad, go right into law school, and it's been a straight path to the law ever since I started enjoying a law class in high school.
Yes, right. And I appreciate you speaking about that, and I appreciate you speaking, because it's so normal for anybody to look at their own story or their own life, especially if you told it. Maybe you've been asked 100 or 500 times about why or how you became an attorney, and you've told the story about the class you took. So you took it in your undergraduate program?
No, in high school. It was just
high school. Okay.
Yeah, just a general law class. I don't know if it was Law Studies 101. It was just an elective.
Right.
It piqued my interest at first, and I took it. I had a really good teacher that made it enjoyable, and I think that had to do a lot with me wanting to pursue it more, because the following year, in my senior year in high school, it was going to be with the same professor. We had already talked about, the high school mock trials are coming up. You participate, actually compete against other high schools. Unfortunately, we didn't make it to the next rounds, but we went 3-1. We beat some good high schools in the district that I can remember, and it made it enjoyable enough that I said, undergrad, I'm not going to be undecided like most young adults are going into college. I don't know what I'm going to do. No, I'm going to do what gets me into law school, which for me was, criminal justice, political science, start heading in the direction of something that I already know that I'm going to enjoy.
Yes.
And that's how I ended up in FIU and FIU College of Law after that.
Yes, and the more you share, the more I think there's so much inspiration even inside of this story. So, and I'll even highlight it for even educators, because as I get older, I feel like I meet more professionals from a variety of backgrounds, and people that are teachers. And sometimes a challenge with teachers, the question they ask, especially if they're not making as much money as other professions, and they're not getting that ahead as far as maybe other business owners or real estate agents or whoever, they can wonder, like, what difference am I making? And I just think about your description of your teacher at your high school of that law class, the difference he made just by making the content interesting in your class inspired you to catch a vision for what you wanted to do, even from your undergraduate degree to your law degree, and now your law firm and your lawyer and your whole career. So even, I don't know how many other people he touched, but clearly the imprints or the fingerprints of his efforts are on your story, and really on all the people that you even touch as well.
No, it's absolutely. It's funny how you break it down that way, because I never got to the point where I followed that breakdown that you just did, but in essence, he did. And I remember on a couple of occasions, I think after even after law school or during law school, I tried to find him, reach out, and see how he was doing. I know he's not
Hmm.
teaching at the high school that I went to anymore, and I kind of lost touch. I don't know where he's at anymore. I might have seen something in Facebook, but it's interesting. He left like a core imprint on the way that
Yes.
I saw the law, the way that I what I took from high school, and what led me to where I am now, and helping people in the different ways that I've already been able to.
Right. And I also think about this question from the lens of the parents. And parents, naturally, parents want great things for their children. The parents want their children to have great careers, and there's all sorts of practices to help your kid. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's, I know I sat down with a couple from India. My wife and I sat down with a couple at a restaurant a few years back, and they were sharing their parents. It was very much a three-path highway of it was only three paths they had. It was lawyer, doctor, engineer, and it was one of those three, and that's what they had to do. That's what their parents were going to pay for their education for them to do, and it was just only those three. And I was like, oh, that's so fascinating because my mom was very very hippie oriented and very free spirited and kind of figure out what you want to do and go with it. Do what makes you happy and do what inspires you or whatever. So you have these different styles of how people approach the parenting journey, but to even think about like your story and to imagine a parent saying, hey, for that elective that you have coming up, yeah, don't take whatever student assistant and walk the halls and collect attendance, and maybe don't take band, but maybe take that law class and see what happens, because that's what your story illustrates, is just the significance of one decision of an elective led to this entire career that there's a prestige with the career that you're in.
Yeah, and my parents were I would say a little bit hands off with education, but kind of, and I sensed that they trusted that I was going to do the right thing just because of the way that they were, in everything in life. But
Mm-hmm.
the main thing that my mom and my stepfather, who I call my dad because he raised me since I was 9 years old,
Mm-hmm.
is right now you're a young adult. Your priority is go to school, because at the end of the day, immigrant parents, the American dream is always in the back of their mind, even if it's not being called the American dream, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in the back of their mind is you need to do good in school, you need to go to college, get a good education, and the idea of me being a lawyer wasn't necessarily on the tip of their tongue saying you got to do this. It was more of you got
Right.
to do something good for yourself,
Yes.
right? And so
Yes.
their concern was, we'll provide for you. You do good. You do what you have to do. Go to school. Don't get in trouble, and we'll support you. If you want to work, you can, but you don't have to. We'll provide for you. Pay for what we need to. Luckily, yeah, I got scholarship to go to college, so they didn't have to pay for that.
Mm-hmm.
I took a job in undergrad because like any young adult, I want to earn my own living. I want to buy my own things and have to ask mom and dad for an allowance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I once I did that, my priorities kind of changed. I had school, I had work, so I started spending less time with family, and they were like, maybe we need to see you a little bit more. So they missed that part of me, but ultimately, they let me make those decisions, knowing that, or at least having faith in that everything that they've provided for me and around me was going to at least guide me in the direction, in a way that I was the one making that decision without them making it
Yes.
for me. Right?
Yes.
It's almost, and I've heard this before, and I can't remember where, that when you're trying to sell something to someone, or you're trying to convince somebody of something, I mean, they have to feel that they were the ones that
Yes.
made the decisions,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
so maybe, I can imagine that they're thinking we're gonna convince them to head in this direction.
Right.
But in a way, the way that they molded me and they guided me, it led me to where I am now by making my own choices. And obviously, I wouldn't be here without their support and
Mm-hmm.
everything else that they provided. I've been blessed. I've been at times spoiled by having that opportunity of my parents to provide that, because I know that there's a lot of young adults, whether from immigrant parents or not, that they may not have that opportunity that I did.
Yes.
And the least that I could have done is do as good as I possibly could under the circumstances, and
Yes.
that's what led me to where I am now, right?
Yes. 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 I love that. And you're right. We had a conversation the other day with the t-ball team that I help coach. My brother and I, he has a 5-year-old daughter, and so she's my niece. And she's on a t-ball team. We coach them, and we're trying to strike that balance of like understanding that we actually can't make them love the game, like because they kind of have to choose that on their own. Like as far as all the kids on our team. But we do believe we can make them hate the game, like if we're too harsh, right? And
Sure.
we drive them too much, or we expect too much, or we're too angry, or yelling is a part of like coaching, like in one angle, as far as especially like if they're like running to second base and you're like yelling from third base for them to pay attention to keep on running. But there's a part of it where it's too much, and we're trying to find that balance. But you're right, like. There's an element of there's power in the way your parents did it. It seemed like they did a more maybe autonomous approach where, hey, we expect you to do good, not necessarily vision casting, whatever, like maybe that Indian example I gave earlier of these 3 careers, but more so, hey, do something good. And you took the principle of my role is to work my hardest. And then, of course, to see where you're at now. I think one thing I believe is you can't argue with results. Like if you are where you are, your parents did something good, and sometimes parents do something they do something bad that even provokes people to do something good.
Sure.
So there's so much that happens, but it is encouraging to hear you talk about the positive influence and the supportive culture that your parents built for you at home for you to be able to move forward through life.
No, absolutely. And I was born here, right? And uh, my family, I have siblings, and my mom. We went to back to Nicaragua, where most of my family is from. I'm the first one that was born here in the United States. So in
Mm,
the early '90s, we went back to Nicaragua. So my first language is Spanish. I started school in Nicaragua. I went all the way to fifth grade, right? So when we were able to come back to United States, um, nobody spoke English, but I was the youngest one and starting school in what's called ESOL programs for non English
right.
speakers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, um, my mom, my parents, they couldn't help me with the homework because they didn't understand the language.
Wow.
So somehow I was, with the help of school, and I can't remember who else in school, but I was able to, that autonomy of that they provided for me.
Wow.
It
Yeah.
was almost a result of the circumstances as well of not being able to help with at least with the language barrier. And so over the
Mm,
first few years in which I was able to overcome that, I think they almost felt that I had grown autonomous in my
yeah.
education themselves, that
Right.
they didn't need to kind of hold my hand as much. They were always there whenever I needed them, but I think that that transition from Nicaragua to here, and having to work through those challenges, at least the language barrier, allowed us to
Yes.
kind of grow into where we are now as a family and where I
Yes.
am now.
Yes. And the reason I love that detail you added there is because, like, how easy it might have been to take on that victim mentality of, oh, well, my parents weren't able to help me with my schoolwork and my homework, and they couldn't even speak the language, and, woe is me, poor me. And see, like, Johnny over there, his parents are helping him with his work, so there's 3 of them, and there's only 1 of me. Like, there's that victim angle, but really, the way you were able to spin that and use that instead of being victim, it's going, okay, like, how can I use this? And you being able to work through whatever the homework, the assignments, the projects, or whatever directions you were given, and being able to do that, I just imagine that probably did so much for your confidence of what you could do independent of your parents. So it's beautiful to imagine you taking that potential difficult circumstance compared to maybe again Johnny, who has both parents helping him with the homework, but then you're able to use that to build up your confidence, to build up your competence for you to move forward.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and like I said, it's I'm that's looking back 20, 25 years from now, right? So obviously details are not as I'm probably misremembering some things,
Sure,
uh,
sure.
but I know that I couldn't have done it without them, right? They were there along the way, parent teacher meetings. I remember that there's some vivid memories about the teachers that they met, and more than anything, what I think I extrapolate from that is remembering them being proud of what I was doing along the way.
Mm.
So maybe in a way, I continue to carry that of doing what I was supposed to, and knowing that um, they were proud of what I was accomplishing along the way, without feeling like I was doing these out of the world accomplishments. I was doing what they hoped I would do for myself, in the ways that were correct, that were right in the circumstances that we were in. And
Right.
so I really I look back at those things, and sometimes um I don't celebrate it as much as other people might.
Mm-hmm.
But somehow I feel like that's normal, because it felt like that's what I was supposed to do, to make sure that I was in a position where I am now, and at least in a good position. Even if I wouldn't have ended as a lawyer, if I would have ended in another career, at least I was giving myself an opportunity to be in a good position when I became an adult and had responsibilities of my own. Right?
Yes, 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 yes. You know, there is something interesting about the what you just described, which was is also about like this almost assumed excellence, where like I was um, speaking to another attorney. We were talking about something very similar, and I was asking her if her getting into law school was significant for her family, or if with her graduating law school, or if her passing the bar, or if her becoming a lawyer, or if her starting her law firm, or her getting her first case, or whatever, like were any of those significant for her family? And she said, like, not in a negative way, but she was like, my family like always assumed that there was going to be something excellent that was going to come from me. So it wasn't like these really elaborate or excessive celebrations whenever I achieved another milestone. It was like, of course you did. Like you're one of us, you know.
Yeah.
And it was pretty refreshing. But even I'm listening to you. What was it like for you? Again, the milestones that you've obtained or attained in your career. What was it like? Your family's response to it all, especially given that you
Yeah.
said
No. I
you're the
would.
first one born here.
Yeah, I would tell you that definitely my family celebrated it more than I did, and I think that's something
Mm,
that I carry like in the back of my head sometimes when celebrating certain accomplishments.
yeah.
That I tend to be the quietest one out of my family. You know, I'm the youngest of four, but for some reason my family thinks that I'm like the most serious one, and I have nieces and nephews that they think, oh, he's the strict one. Don't do something bad around Tio Beto. Tio
Yeah.
Beto, I'm affectionately called Tio Beto. So my family in general, I think, would celebrate it more than I did. But I think internalize it, and I appreciate the accomplishments that I've reached. Obviously, there's plenty more that I want to do. But I celebrated, I guess, in my own way. Long story short,
Mm,
to get to the answer, they did as well. They did it with me.
hmm.
Graduations, celebrations. In a way, bragging and talking about me, I think kind of counts as celebration. So I would
Sure.
remember them, family having, Hispanic family parties, right? For somebody's birthday, Mother's Day coming up, um, going to the beach, going on the boat, and I would stay home and studying. And so I remember studying in law school, of course. And so I have vivid memories of them talking to other people. Yeah, we went here, we had this party, but Gilberto was home studying. Spent the weekend studying. And he's a lawyer and doing this and that. So they're the way that they speak about what I've already done, or what I have been doing, I think also counts as a celebration of me and what I've been
Yes.
doing. And so,
Yes.
yeah, ultimately, yeah, I think they've celebrated it more than I did, even if it hasn't been this, big party celebrating, graduating law school. Obviously, we celebrate that as family, but
Hmm.
individually, they've done that celebration, I think, more than I have, for sure.
Yes. Yes. And what's great about that? It sounds like you built this reputation with them, and you were able to establish boundaries early on about your career, or maybe it was in law school, or even in your undergraduate work, like building out boundaries where you were able to take your responsibilities. And I know sometimes in families or in cultures, especially again, especially Hispanic cultures, where like family gatherings are so significant to be together, but then to have the boundaries in place for you to be able to still take care of your business, and then, but what that did, it seemingly sounds like, is that it built a reputation of somebody who will, who's committed, to who's gonna follow through with his commitments, with the law school and all of that. So it's making more sense about, you mentioned that you have a reputation of being strict, because it sounds like you were willing to make certain sacrifices for that time period. And maybe in some ways, I notice this happens with lawyers as well as other professionals, that sometimes we get kind of typecast into what they experienced of us along the way and how they always might think about us, which is not bad as far as the reputation of diligence, focus, dedication, that maybe they have of you now.
Yeah, I think it's a fair assessment. Obviously, my I said I have older siblings, so they have families. They came when they were older too. So I came back to the States when I was 9 years old, right? My siblings were, my brother's 5 years older than me. My sisters were almost adults already. It's 17, 18 years old. So they had different expectations. They were almost kind of like finish school or start working, different ideas. And again, and my parents too, they came, my stepdad is Cuban. My mom, of course, from Nicaragua. So immigrant parents, what they got to do is provide for their kids, work, provide the best environment that they can, and along those lines, enjoy family as much as possible.
Yes.
And somehow, with all the different types of family members that I have, I ended up following this path of a little bit more, I guess, rigidness towards towards this path of law school, and it kind
Mm-hmm.
of molded my personality, or my personality kind of molded me to go in this direction. I guess it coincides one with the other to ultimately be where I am now.
Yes. And what would you say you enjoy most about being an attorney?
I think definitely, it sounds kind of like a cliche, helping people,
Mm-hmm.
but it is. I get the opportunity with state planning and tax, right, to help people in different parts of their lives. That my mentor used to say, people are coming to us for legal problems, but to them, they are personal problems, right? Somebody owes something to the IRS. It's a legal problem, sure, but that's affecting their livelihoods, their families, and that ends up being a personal problem that affects everything else.
Mm-hmm.
Same with the estate planning aspect. People work their whole lives for however much they attain at a certain age, or however little, and they want to make sure that you know what they have is protected, that it stays within the family. There's definitely within the Hispanic community, but in general, there are some misconceptions about the government taking your property, the government taxing the property that you're leaving to family. Different misconceptions that I've been able to educate people, even if I haven't even helped them in doing documents and providing
Mm-hmm.
anything else other than just legal advice. So I think that part is something that I enjoy immensely. And it sounds like a cliche, helping people, but I do. And then and with tax work, a little bit more than state planning for some reason. And I'm a lawyer. I enjoy math more than reading.
Mm.
And I know a lot of people hate math, and doing the tax work kind of put two and two together. And I'm doing legal work, and I read, but I'm also working with numbers, and that tends to be something that I enjoy, and it makes it a worthwhile experience for me. And I feel that it allows me to provide even better representation to my clients, knowing that I'm enjoying what I'm doing specifically with that
Yes.
that part of the law.
Yes. Yes. And then on one thing you mentioned was the mentor, as well. I wanted to ask you a little bit about that. Is how did you go about that, and at what point did you realize? I think every person is going to be a little bit different when it comes to mentors, but then especially I think men specifically, being willing to have a mentor. I think that's it stands out to me when men have mentors in their life. How did you find your mentor? When did you realize you could really benefit from one? How did that come about for you?
Well, my mentor used to be my boss. I think that sometimes ends up being the case for a lot of people.
Mm,
In law school, I had opportunities to pair up with people that other attorneys, more seasoned attorneys that volunteered to be mentored for law students, and obviously for when they come out of law school, to be able to provide at least a helping hand in understanding the ropes, right? When you get out of law school, and it just coincided that my boss, who did state planning and tax work as well, he ended up being my mentor, and in the sense that I didn't say, hey, you're my mentor, and he's like, oh, you want me to mentor you? No, it just, I learned from him, not just in how to practice law, but in how to practice law in a way that you are that you see people as individuals, as persons, where you have empathy, you are able to relate to people's different situations, and are able to understand. Like I said, people have personal problems, not just legal problems, which is what we're working with. And and ultimately, that's how that relationship was built. I was
mm-hmm,
almost always working with them on different types of cases, and along those lines, for as many cases as we went through, the different circumstances of all these different types of people that walk through the door needing some type of help, and understanding, some of these situations might reoccur, and that allows us to, at least allowed me to learn how to deal with these types of situations again when I see them, or if it's something similar, what sort of systems or what sort of approach I could come up with to make sure that I do the best possible job for that situation, right?
mm-hmm. Yes.
And I diverted a little bit from the question how I encountered him, but yeah, he retired a few years back. My mentor, who was my former boss, and I credit him a lot from time to time. As to the different ways in which I deal with people, right? I
Mm-hmm.
use it as an example often with tax clients, right? The IRS, obviously, it's the government, right? Big Uncle Sam is around the corner watching
Mm-hmm.
you, and something that he taught me is like, look, at the end of the day, these are individuals, right? These are IRS officers, and yes, they're the government. They have a lot of power, but within the different officers that work at the IRS, there's a spectrum, right? They know this, they have this much power. Some of them want to use it. Some of them want to show you that they have it and just help you as much as they can. And somewhere in that spectrum, there's other people that are using it to help to get things done. At the end of the day, there's this spectrum of people that you're going to be dealing with, and the results are not always going to be the same. But because I was able to learn from him how different people were going to interact, I was able to at least come into different cases with the understanding that every case is going to deal with these different types of officers with
Yes.
different types of power and goals, and personal lives that affect how they decide things on one day or the other. um,
Mm-hmm.
a- and that's how that relationship worked out. I learned so much, and I credit him a lot for the way that I practice today.
That's great. No, that's great. And I'm glad to hear that. I think it speaks to somebody being able, there's that visual that people give of the, is your cup empty for it to be filled up by somebody else? And I think there's that, emptying of the cup that's important for anybody to do if we want to grow and maybe maximize some of our life path moving forward, especially if people have already charted the path forward. They got the map, they have the tools, they have the insight of what it was like. And then for them to be able to, for him to be willing to pass it off to you, of course, if you're working for him, he has an incentive to be able to equip you as much as possible. And then you have an incentive to learn, because if you want to be able to move forward without having to get the same scars maybe that he got, then
Right.
it is an incentive to be a learner and be humble, to listen and to be poured into.
Yeah, absolutely. And something that you reminded me of, right? I started working for my mentor, my former boss, when I was in law school, right? Like a lot of law students, they look for a summer job, internship, something to get experience. So I started as a law clerk, an assistant, and I worked with him and a couple of other attorneys. Um, but along with me, there were other law clerks that also worked through here, and not all of them panned out in the firm. And sometimes I remember having at least that sense of pride that, when I was done with law school, I was able to, remain as an attorney because I did so well, and or at least the way that I worked with this firm made sense to, have security and, a secured job right after law school. And so sometimes I look back at my ability to, have these relationships and understanding of how I would practice, how I would learn from these different attorneys that were here, that allowed me to, go through law school as a law clerk and then come out on the other end with the position that I was in as an associate attorney in the firm.
Yes.
I think that I take a lot of pride in that. I guess is what I'm trying to
Mm.
say.
Yes, yes, yes. No, that's powerful. It's powerful, and it speaks to the idea of working really hard wherever you are because you don't know. What if you had the mindset of, all right, I'm gonna give my the least amount of effort possible to not lose my job, but also not to be excellent, and then all of a sudden you finish law school and then you don't have a door open to you, and you try to go back to where you were, and it's like, well, why would we hire you as an attorney when we saw your work ethic, we saw how lazy you were, we saw how much you slacked, we saw how late you would come in, we saw how early you would leave, and all of these factors that we could think, oh, well, it doesn't matter. No, it does matter. The character we're developing matters all along the way. People say it when it comes to even like sports and like NBA playoffs. Oh, like you could coast in the NBA season and then you could just turn it all on in the playoffs. But then like there's so many people who are like, no, it doesn't work that way. Like you gotta be excellent all along the way, and you can't turn excellence on and off because if you try to, you might have already built in a habit of mediocrity, and turning on the habit of excellence isn't just like this switch, but it's more of this maybe a furnace you just want to keep burning hot on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, it's something that, like anything in life, if you want good results, right? You have to be consistent, right? And then obviously there'll be obstacles along the way, whatever they may be, work related, family, health. I've come to a point where I understand things are just gonna come up inevitably, one way or the other, and if you can consistently do good in
Yes.
whatever it is that you're doing, right? Things will eventually work themselves out, right? However the chips may lie, the different expressions that you can use, things will work themselves out if you just consistently do the good things that get you to where you are now in life,
Yes.
or to where you want to be, right?
Hmm.
And so at least being consistent is just one of the other things that you can, lean back on and understand, if I'm doing at least good work here, I'm going to be able to find good results along the way. Whether or not whatever obstacles come in the middle of that, down the road, everything's just going to is going to work out one way or the other.
Yes. 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 So true. So true. And it is that excellence seems to open up doors because really, if you think about any boss's perspective or any business owner's perspective, they it's almost like there's always going to be a room for excellent professionals on the team because they're so hard to come by because they're so rare um, that I've seen it in a variety of organizations over the years where maybe an owner or a leader of a team, an organization didn't initially have a budget for a professional, but if somebody came on the market, then you move heaven and earth to find that budget because if this person comes on board, the value isn't going to be just added; it's going to be multiplied. You're going to multiply that
Of
value,
course.
and you're able to move forward that much more efficiently.
Of course, and I think that kind of, reminded me of something that maybe you had planned on discussing, which was, the relationship between, being a lawyer and having a business as a
Hmm.
lawyer, right? And so something that I've been, dealing with, personally, is trying to find that balance between being, a lawyer, right, representing individuals,
Yes.
and seeing my law practice as a business, so that it functions, almost as any other business does, right? With, its CEOs, its managers, that there's some fluidity to the way that the representation of the clients isn't interfered by the administrative work of business. And I think that's something that um, myself I'm dealing with, and I'm sure other attorneys deal with, because I've had conversations with colleagues about how to make that transition, or at least make that synchronize those two things between
Yes.
being a lawyer and being a business owner.
Yes.
And that's something that I think it's important, at least for attorneys to, at least attorneys that are trying to have their own practice, right? If you work for somebody else, obviously somebody else has already developed the systems to run the business in a certain way. But when you're the business owner, there's a certain balance that you have to kind of fight through, and figuring things out along the way.
Yes, yes, and I can see how there's a massive learning curve, because that business owner is one role, and then the professional inside of the role as an attorney is a different one. And if you're also wearing both hats, hey, well, I'm the attorney, and I'm the business owner. That's it's a juggling match. It's something
Yeah,
to juggle and figure out how to maximize and be efficient in both, because you can be the best attorney in the world, um, may not make you the best business owner in the world, and that's okay. If somebody just wants their time to be spent on law-oriented activities. Now, if somebody says, no, actually, I want to be a lawyer, but I also want to be a business owner, then there's an element of understanding how both work. So I'm really glad that you're thinking that way, and then you're also processing the journey of what that looks like to be an effective business owner, and then also being open, because I think there's sometimes people sell different dreams to us along the way, and then we cross different uh, milestones, and we go, oh wait, I thought this was my dream, but maybe this is somebody else's. Because I mean, I know in at least the content I'm often exposed to is like scale, big, larger, expand, grow, and all of this, and I get that. I'm not down on that, but sometimes I also wonder, and I value the business owners who have tried that and have done that and go, you know what? I scaled and I didn't really like it. I didn't like. Some people don't like scaling. They're like, I just want to be an artist, or like the artist, or like, I just want to be the professional, and that's it. And then that's okay, because there's people who are great, whatever, wallet makers, and like maybe they just want to make wallets. And then
of
there's other
course.
people who, no, I want to own the business. I want to own different facilities, and I want to oversee sales teams of wallets, salesmen and saleswomen. But anyway, I'm excited to see where your journey takes you, and what the path lies before you, and all the lessons you learn along the way.
No, thank you. No, it's something that definitely I've been working through a lot more recently.
Yeah.
My firm's now in its fourth year, right? So I had established myself right before COVID. Sorry, right before the COVID times. So it was a
Hmm.
little bit of a scary time, knowing that
Right.
I'm out on my own now. And luckily I had developed certain relationships. I had worked for certain clients, and word of mouth kind of helped me at least establish myself those first couple of years. And I think now I've gotten to a point where it makes sense to try to figure that next step of business, and practicing law. And it's a good problem to have, I
Yes.
guess, to be
Yes.
able to at least have more options and more things to think through, rather than just practicing, getting clients, helping people, providing as much help as I can, while providing for myself as an attorney, as an individual, right? with
Yeah.
with my
Right.
own personal goals and aspirations, as
Yes.
an individual. So
Yes.
I think it's a good problem to be kind of working through when you've gotten
Yes.
to that point.
Yes. Now, I wanted to ask you about the profile of your clientele when it comes to taxes. I know there's maybe two perceptions that were, at least in my brain, you could maybe spell out a few different ones. So there's like one profile of the person who's having some some problems with the IRS or whatever, and there's that person that's almost in trouble. And then in my head, there's another profile of a person, maybe a wealthy business owner, who's like, how do I position myself to pay the least amount or least percentage of taxes that I possibly can with all of this money and revenue and properties and businesses that I have going? Is there maybe a third and fourth profile, or is it mainly those two buckets, or what's that? What's the profile of the tax
Yeah,
clientele that you
I would
see?
say that I don't think that there's just these two buckets, right? Because you know, in a world where with a lot of entrepreneurs, right, a lot of people are quote unquote self-employed.
Right.
So when they're self-employed, people are just paying themselves, you know, a salary when they're getting money, right? Um, I'm a business, right? I'm my own business. I'm an attorney, but I structure myself in the form of a business with salary and the such. But not everybody does that for whatever reason, personal reasons or understanding of the law, right? So a lot of self-employed individuals, you know, they're just receiving income without thinking about the IRS is going to want some taxes on this income that I'm
Right.
earning. And what ends up happening is, you know, life comes at you, and that money that maybe people had saved for taxes is no longer there. And so they run up these huge tax bills that kind of just snowball sometimes, right? If you're always self-employed, you know, you're always getting this income without any deductions, without any anticipation of
Mm-hmm.
taxes. Then there's other individuals, for example, business owners, right, that have the responsibility to, for example, withhold taxes for their employees. And that withholding, instead of sending it to the IRS, they kind of keep it for the business to kind of run it, and that
Right.
ends up creating business responsibility, business liabilities, right? So, and then there's other people that come into, for example, salaried employees that maybe they do a business that generated some profit, and when they filed their taxes, they had this unexpected additional income, right? And so
Mm.
along those spectrums is where you find the different pockets of people with tax liabilities. And you know, it can be something as small as $1,000 debt, a $1,500 debt can feel like a mountain depending on where the people are coming from. And then there's others that owe hundreds of thousands and even millions. And I've seen all through those ranges, and thankfully there's solutions to those problems. uh, but they take some time dealing with the IRS.
Right.
um, but there's always some way to try to figure out a way to deal with the IRS. I think more than anything, you know, and this is not legal advice, but more than anything, with the IRS, you just got to let them know that that you're listening to them, that you're not
Right.
just ignoring them. That's the one thing. Once the IRS feels that you're ignoring them, then that's when you start finding yourself in trouble, right?
Right.
If you're being responsive, you're gonna at least find some solution. It might not be the greatest solution, but it's better than if you're not answering and they surprise you with something, which they can and they have, and that's been, you know, that's happened sometimes when I get clients like, oh, I owe this money from X years ago, but the IRS just levied my bank account, or they just put a lien on my house, right? They just
Yeah.
garnished my wages, right? So it happens, you know, when people have been ignoring them, and sometimes it happens without a fault of their own. You know, they moved and they're no longer getting notices from the IRS. It happens, right? Life happens. So along those different spectrums is where, you know, every sort of individual, I think, can come up with the reason for having a tax debt. I don't see it
Sure.
as limited to just, you know, the wealthy business owner and
Mm-hmm.
then the individual that just had extra income. There's so many different circumstances that,
Right.
too many to list.
And maybe this is getting too much in the weeds, but I'm curious because whenever I hear something that's connected to something else that I heard, so you were talking about you know, even the tax debt and the things that could come up. I know in this current era that we're in, the PayPal era, the Cash App, the Venmo, the
Sure.
Zelle, the crypto, you know, all these different ways to um, make payments, receive payments, and then the efforts by some to try to keep stuff off books. Like I know I think PayPal has a functionality. Um, I was hearing about this that I guess you could choose a friend and family, send the money back and forth,
Sure.
where it looks as though it's not business. So people that are even doing business, I think I was listening to a podcast the other day and somebody was talking about they bought a pair of, I guess, off. I guess they were bootleg name brand, like really fancy shoes or something. But then they bought them from this guy in California. But he he wanted to receive the payment via PayPal, but they wanted the payment to say
Friends and
friends and
family.
family, friends and family, so it wouldn't look like a business transaction. But anyway, again, maybe this question is way too much in the weeds. But do you find situations like that where people are really trying to go to get around, and then do you see like the cautionary tales, the problems that it creates later?
Not yet. Definitely not yet, because I think that those regulations dealing with those types of transactions are still fairly new, and people are still learning how to deal with them. Accountants, lawyers are still trying to understand the magnitude of the law and what applies and what doesn't. I haven't looked at it recently, but I know there was a delay in the implementation of that law as well. So I
Yeah.
think things that were happening recently, people could find some, peace of mind knowing that, the $100 that we send to the friends and family is okay. So I think, but within the near future, I think they'll finalize some of those rules, and then some of those cases will start, appearing. This is
Mm.
in which where I would have to represent somebody that did something like that. Um,
Right. So,
but not
okay,
not yet, not yet.
right. So not legal advice then, but the idea is there's an element right now where maybe in the future people will look back to this time period and call this the Wild Wild West, where almost anything went. But then in the future, things will likely be a lot more regulated than they are now when it comes to trying to, you know, um, skate around the rules of the system.
Right, and to kind of piggyback off that idea that now is, it's not there, but it's almost there. If you look at cryptocurrency, right? I haven't had any issues, any clients, luckily, that have, any sort of income tax liabilities or responsibilities because of crypto. But crypto's been around, what, I don't know, 12, 14 years, something like that. It's only been within the last 2, 3 years that the IRS has included questions in their forms about
Right.
cryptocurrency. So whenever somebody has a business or individual, whenever they owe anything to the IRS, there are certain forms that I have to prepare and work with the client. And those forms now ask, do you have cryptocurrency? Where is it?
Right.
What's its value? When did you acquire it? And so, it's not happening now, but somewhere down the road, some of these questions are going to be adjusted where, they're going to start asking about these transactions and the reporting, uh, and unfortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, it's a part of, the law catching up with the way that the world is
Yes.
adapting, or evolving. And
Yes.
so, it did it with crypto, and it's going to do it with these, mobile transactions, and there may be something down the line that people are coming up with that will be there as well.
Yes. 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 It does make you think about like how much longer like cash is gonna be around because like the digital and virtual payment it basically makes it seem as though eventually everything's gonna be tracked, and if cash truly becomes obsolete, then then again the idea that eventually there will be it would be very very difficult to hide any kind of under the table payments when it comes to different
Of
people
course.
trying to
Yeah, and I
avoid
think,
taxes.
yeah, and I know we're kind of going into a very specific topic that I don't know that I'm that educated on
Sure, sure.
on cryptocurrency, but I know that, at least the U.S. government, right, and the Fed, they're developing some sort of currency that they could track better, right? So along those lines, I wouldn't doubt that legislation would be implemented to kind of make that more, if cash is going to be obsolete, right? This new governmental electronic currency is somehow going to be involved in, and the government somehow being able to track where this money is going, because at the end of the day, they're going to need to have some sort of tax coming in to, provide for the country, the roads, the
Right.
tolls, the social welfare, and everything that's provided with their taxes, and everything that shouldn't be, and all that. But you know,
Yes. Yes,
it
yes.
it's part of an evolving world.
Sure. No, for real. Now, let me ask you a couple of questions around you deciding to focus on estate planning and the tax law. I'm curious about it in general, but also I'm curious about it with some of your background that you mentioned. You mentioned you when you were in your undergraduate degree, you were really thinking criminal law. I'm curious how you pivoted around that, and also I'm also thinking about your parents. You mentioned your mom from Nicaragua, your stepdad from Cuba. So then, like the idea of sometimes people who come from immigrant backgrounds go, oh, like immigration law, is it's my family went through this, so let me be a champion of that. So anyway, how did you again choose estate planning and tax law, but then also not go the routes of criminal law or even immigration.
Yeah, and it's funny that you say immigration because in FIU law school, and I did an immigration clinic where I was representing some individuals in deportation proceedings, some that were even in a detention center. So I had an opportunity to even to be exposed to the immigration aspect of it. And it's a difficult area of practice, and I would say like along the lines with family law as well, because they tend to be areas where the emotional aspect of representing somebody is a lot closer than tax and estate planning, right? On my end, I may be dealing with people's problems, but on a more financial level, right? When you get into
Mm.
these other aspects of law where the emotion is so much more evident,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's
Mm-hmm.
a little bit, I feel it's a little bit tougher to deal with those different aspects because sometimes in all types of law, right, there are results that are not going to be great results for individuals. Sometimes the law is not against you, sometimes it is, but only to a certain degree. So I was exposed to a certain degree to immigration law, and I didn't feel that I wanted to stay in that area. Part of
Mm-hmm.
it was it would involve some sort of litigation aspect, which really didn't attract me. I've never been one that wants to be dealing with the confrontational aspect of litigation.
Mm-hmm.
And so once I started doing, estate planning and tax as an assistant, it felt, it's transactional in a way, and it felt more of a straightforward path where I could kind of see the parameters of black and white law, that I could do X, Y, and Z. If your type of family dynamics, your circumstances are this, then I know that we can do this type of planning so that your family can receive, your property in this way. And the same goes with tax law, right? Uh, IRS regulations, the Internal Revenue Code, it is what it is, right? It's in black and white. There are some discretionary decisions along the way that I have to deal with, right, from the IRS perspective, from the government perspective. But for the most part, right, I'm working within these certain parameters of, you know, tax responsibilities are this, didn't pay this amount. The IRS has standards with regards to how much money people should be, making if they owe the IRS money to come up with payment plans, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the idea of finding this, black and white part of the law where I could work with and find solutions w- further away from the gray area. I would say, I
Yes.
think it attracted me. It helped me focus in on making sure that, this is what I like, this is what I enjoy doing. And the
Mm-hmm.
combination of, of finding this area of law, these areas of law where the parameters of what I would be able to do for people were kind of set in. There's always going to be things that are there's case law that affects certain decisions, but it's not as much as the litigation aspect of family law, maybe, or immigration or criminal law. I think you asked, why not criminal law?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't do anything with criminal law. I ended up just doing a criminal law class, and to me it was just okay. It didn't spark a light
Mm.
bulb. It didn't spark anything for me to say yes, I want to do more of this.
Right. Right.
It just didn't. And having found myself in that opportunity to do state planning and tax, and it coincided with the way my personality, the way that I tend to view and want to view things, and it just worked. It worked, and I was lucky that it did.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I didn't find myself, then maybe I would have found myself, hopping from different law from one place to another, looking
Right.
for that thing that made sense.
Yes.
And
Yes.
this just made sense for me, and how I perceive myself as practicing law for the rest of my career.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I love that you're able to explore that, whether it's in law school or even some people explore it in their internships. But because of the variety of options there are within the legal arena, you're able to figure out what works, what speaks to your soul, what resonates with your being. And it sounds like you really found that with estate planning and tax law. I'm curious, especially when people are really family oriented and their family gets together. I'm curious when it comes to like estate planning is how you maybe navigate or operate. Because again, I don't know your family. I don't know how they operate, but but then I know there's so much thought with people who are in estate planning, thinking about generational wealth, about protecting the family, and kind of helping set them up for success. But then there's this balancing act of like maybe not wanting to charge family, but or wanting to charge them, or they wanting free services, and trying to figure out like maybe how to navigate these kind of delicate waters and all of that. How do you have you been able to navigate? With estate planning is so relevant for the longevity of your family, your siblings, everyone.
Sure.
I know different attorneys have approached it different ways. Some people are like, hey, they'll send them the whatever the rocket lawyer or whatever it is. So for they have the template. Hey, fill this out, and then we'll work at it from there. But how do you go about it, navigating it with your family?
Well, no, for my immediate family, I would say that, um, right, I have multiple siblings with their own families and family dynamics. For each of them, I would sit down with them and do like their individual planning. I'm not sending
Mm.
them the rocket lawyer, nothing like that. I think I'm comfortable enough with spending a little time with them and sitting down and planning everything out. So
Mm-hmm.
that's I don't think that's an issue for me. I personally, I find it hard to, for better or worse, right? I find it hard to say no to people sometimes. So I tend
Mm-hmm.
to, on occasion, kind of overwhelm myself just by the fact of not letting others down, right? Somebody asks me for something now and then somebody else, and I don't want to let any of them down. But,
Right.
I wouldn't feel that way with, with my family. It's my family. And so I don't see it as a burden. Obviously, I'm going to do whatever I can to help them, right? And this is what I
Mm.
know, this is what I can do. So I I, I don't feel it as a responsibility, um, but I understand that this is what I can do and this is what I can help you with. I'm gonna do it.
Right.
Similarly to, like, for example, I think of, of my brother. My brother is very hands on with, like, fixing things around the house. I'll do my things, right, but I would be hesitant to, for example, to hang a TV on the wall because I'm I might open a hole too wide and then that TV is not gonna be too big. So, I can do things around the house and I'll defend myself. But if for example, I'm not feeling comfortable, I'll call my brother and be like, I need this. Come on, we gotta do this.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
because I'm comfortable that he knows how to do that, in the same vein, right? I'm in the law, and even if I don't know certain types of fields of law, excuse me, if somebody, even if it's not my brother or my siblings, somebody asks me, "Hey, do you know this?" I'll be like, "I don't, but I'll find you somebody."
Sure.
Right?
Mm.
So, and that kind of goes along the same lines of, I want to come through for people, even if I'm not the one like doing it.
Right. 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 No respect. I know there's I think the etiquette is something like maybe the microcosm of like going out to dinner and then no, I'll pay, no, you pay, and okay, no, 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 I got it. Eventually, one person like, it pays. I know in different professions, because you're paid for your expertise, you're paid for your time
Sure.
ordinarily, and then for you not to, and then it's interesting. I think when people go through like, hey, if a family member was like, I want to pay you for it, and then you're like, no, and then it's like eventually one side wins. You either pay for it or you don't or whatever. But no, I appreciate your heart about it. Your heart to want to be able to help and support people regardless, and be there for them. As you mentioned, they're there for you. Like your brother's there for you if you were doing something around the house that was beyond your expertise.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I say this, jokingly, but kind of serious as well. Like, family is gonna take care of each other, right? One way or the
Right.
other, the expertise. I joke around with my sisters, right? They're older, so they baby me when I was little, and one of my sisters still, calls me affectionate by like, names that she would call me when I was younger. But when
Mm-hmm.
it comes to, for example, to my sisters, I come to their house, and there's food for me all the time. So,
Right.
that's how they repay me. Like, I
Mm.
don't have to bring anything. Do you want to come see the kids? You come whenever you want. There's different ways that family just takes care of each other. It doesn't. It's never gonna be an equal, like, 50-50, like you said, like
Right.
paying the bill. Right? There's different
Mm.
ways that as family you value what each other provides for each
Yes.
other. There's roles, right? Even if unassigned, and and that happens with family, and I think in life sometimes too. right? Certain things
Mm-hmm.
you expect from other people, even if it's not, of monetary value. We have colleagues, friends, and other people that provide certain values to our life that they don't expect you to pay it back. But in a way, you kind of do, in the own value that you provide to other people's lives and their well being, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. 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 Respect all the way around. Well, Gilberto, I want to be respectful of your time, brother. I want to say a big thank you for spending some time with me today on the podcast.
No, I'm absolutely thrilled that we were able to make this happen. I think you've helped me kind of explore things a little bit deeper than I normally would have. Right? I'm normally, just getting through life, through being a lawyer, representing people, having people's situations in front of me, and just getting through life, and not being able to kind of step back sometimes and analyze what's in front of me, what I had to get through to get here, and what may be ahead of me, depending on different decisions that I make through life. So I'm really grateful for you setting this up and making this happen.
Yes, sir. Hey, well, we got to do a part two. We only got two, like maybe two or three questions, and we have other questions on the table for next time. But hey, if, next time you're thinking about planning a trip to Texas, I'm in San Antonio. I built this studio behind me the past year, and I certainly want to use it to do some more in-person interviews. So
Okay.
whether that's a part two we do down the line, and you're in Texas, it would be great to host you over here down the line. But no, but thank you for your time. Hey, tell people where do you want them to find you? Do you want them to go to your website or your Instagram? Where's the top couple of places you might
Well,
want them to
I
go?
mean, on my Instagram, you can find me at Matute underscore law, right? I don't post a lot of, business stuff. On occasion, I'll post some tips here and there, but you'll also see me post a lot of things related to running. I run a lot. I run a marathon here and there. So you'll find some stuff there. But my website is matutelaw.com. You can definitely find me on my website. And that name, I think, is very unique. I don't know that there's too many Matutes out there. So if you Google Matute Law, you're probably going to come up with my website, my information. If you want to learn more about estate planning, tax, and what I do, definitely just go to the website, and you'll see some interesting stuff there.
All right, I love it. All right, everybody. Well, hey, thank you all, precious listeners, for tuning in. You make these episodes like this special. Let us know what you thought in the comments. Be sure to go over to Matute Law on his Instagram for sure and show love over there and build him up. Let him know what you thought about the podcast. And if nothing else, we'll see everybody on the next episode. Bye bye, everybody.